And now it's time for Power of Prophecy, continuing the legacy of Tex Mars, exposing evil and promoting Jesus Christ as Savior. Here's your host, Jerry Barrett.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Power of Prophecy. I'm your host, Jerry Barrett, and I'm honored and privileged to be here with you today. Received quite a few comments from last week's program on Dr, and I am grateful for the kind words. I read everything just like Tex did. I read everything that everybody sends me. I've got some research material that was sent to me, and I appreciate that as well. This week, we've got Dr. Steve in the studio with me, and this is a vitally important program. It's titled, Our Elderly, a National Treasure, Not a Cash Crop. And as we all increase in our years, our wisdom, and our knowledge, we need to be aware of the pitfalls that befall a lot of our elderly, and that's what we're going to cover today. Now, last week I asked for prayer for my mother since my father passed, and I had kind words on that as well. I appreciate that. Sue sent me a beautiful card, and thank you for that. And I asked people if they needed prayer to email me, or you could email pastor@biblehomechurch.org and get Tex an email. He'll pray for you, him and Wanda. Now, Tex is at biblehomechurch.org, biblehomechurch.org. You can listen every Wednesday to a new sermon. It streams online every week. And I received one email from a gentleman who asked for prayer for his brother who's got failing health and for his sister who is getting up in age. Pray for her continued health and to pray for him because he is a sinner. But we're all sinners, and we all need prayer. We all need to ask forgiveness for our sins. And that was the prayer request that I got this week. I want to thank everybody that sent them in. Wayne, I appreciate you being one of our prayer warriors. Now, this week, we've got Dr. Steve. Now, he's a graduate from Baylor University, and he went to law school at South Texas College of Law. So he has a Juris Doctorate, which means he is a doctor. That's why we lovingly call him Dr. Steve. And he's our conspiracy scientist. He's our resident conspiracy scientist. And I asked Steve when he became interested in conspiracies. And he said for the last 8 years he's been intrigued by conspiracies. In the last 4 he's really gotten hot and heavy into the research. And it all started with an essay that he wanted to write on World War I. He began studying to see what led to the beginning of that war. And that led him to Power of Prophecy, where he came in, offered to work for books, and Michelle, our business administrator, talked to Tex, and Tex said, pay him whatever he wants. And Steve came in, started working for books a few hours a week, and the next thing you know, he's one of the 4. And Steve is here, and we're happy to have him. Now, before I get Steve on here, I want to give you a brief breakdown of the problem that's facing our elderly. Financial exploitation is almost $17 billion a year. Now, Steve's going to have a breakdown on the figures and everything, but I just wanted to touch on this. Criminal fraud of our elderly is at $12.7 billion a year, and caregiver abuse is almost $7 billion a year. These are with a B. That is a lot of money. And a little later in the program, we're going to cover some of the criminal fraud, the scams that are perpetrated against the elderly and what leads to that. So, Dr. Steve, welcome to Power of Prophecy.
Well, thanks for having me back on, Jerry. And this topic is vitally important.
Now, Steve, what led you to the topic of elder abuse?
Well, last fall, there was a hurricane, Hurricane Irma. There were actually more than one hurricane, but Hurricane Irma was the one that hit Florida. And there was a nursing home in the Fort Lauderdale area, and they did not evacuate their patients. They just left them there. Even though it was a state-mandated evacuation, and there was a state-approved evacuation center across the street, which was a hospital. They left them there. A nurse saw some patients that appeared to be coming on foot. They were extremely hot. She walked across the street. There was 3 feet of water mixed with bodily fluids in the nursing home. It was a complete disaster area. The first room she looked in, there was a deceased gentleman in his bed. 14 people died as a result of that disgrace, and they have 12 of the 14 were declared homicides. But I saw that, and I thought, I'm going to look into this, because what I found was that the nursing home lobby is so strong that actually there's no recourse. And when there's no recourse, there's very little incentive to do the right thing when you're taking care of people, especially people that need the kind of care and attention that our elderly do. And I was disgusted. But what floored me even more, that's not even half of our issue, literally. Over half of elder abuse and fraud is when the elderly person is living in their home, is actually living on their own with a husband, with family members. And then it went from there. And then I got in more fully into the subject, and I really saw that we're facing a national epidemic that is not spoken of at all.
So what is exactly elder abuse?
There are a number of definitions for elder abuse. The one that I believe best communicates elder abuse is by a federally funded report called the Elder Roadmap from a couple of years ago. It states, elder abuse includes physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, neglect, and abandonment. Perpetrators include children, other family members, and spouses, as well as staff at nursing homes, assisted living, and other facilities. The elderly may be reluctant to report abuse themselves because of fear of retaliation, lack of physical and or cognitive ability to report, or because they do not want to get the abuser in trouble.
So, how many elder Americans are being abused?
That's another area that I found is sorely lacking, and that's in the research area. Elder abuse is drastically underreported, and it's for a number of reasons. Mainly what I've found is fear of being sent to a nursing home. There's fear of being told, Mom, I don't think you can live by yourself anymore. Or, well, if this is happening to you, then we should probably get you full-time care. Or, this is happening to me because of something I did as a parent, because generally the abusers are members of the family. They blame themselves. They don't want to see their child go to prison, don't want to get them in trouble. Approximately 1 in 10 elderly Americans, that's 60 plus in age, has experienced some form of elder abuse, but only 1 in 24 incidents reach authorities.
Wow. So we know child abuse and spousal abuse are big topics. We see things in the news all the time, but we never hear anything about elder abuse, do we?
No, and I've thought about that a lot as far as why that is. It's a very Hollywood is part of the problem with the youth culture, and it just isn't spoken of. It really isn't. The older characters in movies are generally butts of jokes or act out idiotically stereotypical roles, and It really is not at all spoken of, especially when you hear that over $36 billion a year, that's just from the fraud. That's not talking about, a family member who is physically abusing, or a carer who is physically abusing the elder that he or she is taking care of.
You say a lot of it is family members. The Bible tells us to honor thy mother and father, and we're not really honoring them, are we?
No, and it's such a tough topic. A lot of the abusers, and there's absolutely no excuse for it. The abusers, I think, in their own mind, become extremely upset and frustrated. Those are the ones that aren't the criminals. When it's a family member, the carers that partake in it a lot of times aren't even screened if it's a caregiver service. For example, a lady from Kentucky that worked for a caregiver service was sent to take care of an elderly gentleman and his wife in Detroit. She moved the wife into the basement, who died shortly thereafter. She moved her mother into the guest bedroom and then married the elderly gentleman. When the kids finally got hold of the bank accounts, they found out that he was overdrawn across the board. He had absolutely no money left, and it turned out she had 2 prior felonies for fraud. And yet, really, because he was making his own decisions, there was really no recourse for the family.
Wow. What makes an older adult vulnerable to this abuse?
There are a number of aspects that lead to making the older adult vulnerable. The first off that really is by far the biggest issue is with dementia. They represent a very large portion of the elderly who are abused. Dementia they basically represent 50% of those abused, and other aspects are not being involved in community activities, being socially withdrawn. In other words, people that aren't there to take the temperature, not literally, but take the temperature of the person, just kind of see, I think something's going on with my neighbor. She just doesn't look right. She's real upset. And the other day she said she didn't go to the grocery store because she was too tired, but I have a feeling it might be because she doesn't have any money. And if the person doesn't have a close friend or family member like that to kind of keep tabs on them, that makes them highly, highly at risk. Women are generally more likely to be abused than men. A lot of that is because of the life expectancy, in that women generally are going to be living alone more than men. And also, a lot of it has to do with scams and, being charitable. We're a very giving society. I mean, our elderly are, as a group, wonderful people. They want to give, they want to help, and a lot of the elderly financial abuse, frankly, takes advantage of that. One of the things I found that was troubling is that older people, in other words, younger seniors, actually are at higher risk, and that is a higher risk for the verbal mistreatment, the financial mistreatment, than older adults. They believe that has to do with the fact that they're in situations where they're susceptible to it more often. They'll be living. They're more likely to be living with family as opposed to at a nursing home. And again, with regard to that same topic, living with a large number of household members other than a spouse, that is associated with an increased risk of abuse, especially financial abuse. And lower income or poverty has also been associated with elder abuse.
So these are some of the warning signs that people need to be aware of with their loved ones.
Right. Those anyone who fits into one of those categories is certainly at risk, really. And let's face it, just our seniors are at risk by being seniors, and because it is so widespread. As for warning signs that we can look for, it's fairly, from the definition, it's what you would think it is. Physical abuse, you would look for bruises, pressure marks, abrasions. As for emotional abuse, and like I mentioned with the keeping somebody you can keep tabs, that's why it's so important to stay in touch with people. And one of the things that I found we run into here is when the elderly individual has a fear, and a justified one, of being sent to a nursing home. My grandmother, who passed away last year, she would always say, people go to nursing homes to die. They get sent to nursing homes to die. And I think she really believed that if she could just stay in her little apartment, that she would be just fine. And actually what happened was she ended up dying because she wasn't drinking enough water. And the reason that she explained, because we repeatedly told her, you need to drink more water, she said that it was difficult to get up and go to the restroom, so she wasn't drinking as much water as she should have. And actually that led to her death. And the fear of being sent to a nursing home is extremely strong, and it really, really goes to the heart of a lot of the abuse that's used it's used as a threat by the abusers. If you tell on me, you're going to a nursing home. If you tell your family, they're going to know that you can't handle your own situation. I mean, and they will keep it a secret. So it is an extremely, extremely serious aspect of this. Financial abuse, of course, that's going to be really a huge part of what we're talking about today, because so many people are at risk. The elderly population is growing, and there are criminals out there who are absolutely in business to steal money from elderly people. And I'll get to, as another warning sign, neglect. Neglect is essentially leaving someone unattended, and as you would think, bed sores, weight loss, of course. If the person can't feed himself, if the person is left unattended for 3 days, there will be obvious signs, and weight loss will be one of them. And with verbal emotion and emotional abuse, that's another one where it's important to have a family member keeping tabs, because there'll be some emotional changes in the victim that really, if someone doesn't know that person and know the person well, like a relative or a close neighbor or friend, that can go undetected as well.
So you've told us about the warning signs, the vulnerability of our elders, but what are the end results? What are the effects of this elder abuse?
Well, the most dramatic effect is that the elder that is abused is 300% more likely to die, and that's a little difficult. That's a strange statistic there, because the thought may be, well, we're all going to die, but from a result of the abuse. Wow. So when we're talking about other abuse groups, it's going to result in death, and it's the examples out there, unless you really get into it and understand how sensitive it is, and it can result in death. For example, in California, a lady didn't want to tell her kids that her plumbing needed work because she was worried they'd want her to sell the house and go into a nursing home. So she called a plumber herself. The plumber defrauded her. The job kept growing and growing. The plumber was beating on her door at 10 o'clock at night, demanding more money, calling her all hours. She withdrew. She ended up having to be put in a nursing home and died, as the doctor said, as a direct result of what this plumber did to her. And that you see that over and over. A Pearl Harbor veteran whose son hired him a lady to come over numerous times a month. It was $250 a month to do his grocery shopping, take him to the doctor's appointments. Well, the son got the credit card bills. She had put a 10% down payment on a timeshare in Las Vegas. She'd bought herself a Rolex. She'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on the credit cards. When he told his father, and I might add, the father started to care about her like a daughter. And the father said, she thought because I was old, I was stupid. And it's just heartbreaking. He quit eating. He had to be put in a full-time facility, and he died shortly thereafter. And his son said, her actions resulted in the death of my father. So that is how elder abuse can result in death. It is extremely, extremely upsetting to the victim, and rightly so.
Now, are there criminal penalties for abusing? I mean, she defrauded that gentleman of thousands of dollars, but are there other penalties that can be given to the abuser?
Well, and this is an area, again, that, like, child abuse and spousal abuse, we've been hearing about that for decades. As a matter of fact, child abuse came to the fore in the 70s with Mommy Dearest by Christine Crawford, Joan Crawford's daughter. And she actually, I was reading where she said that because of that book, it really, really made some changes with child abuse. My theory on why we don't hear about elder abuse versus child abuse is that you don't have any elders that grow up, so to speak, and talk about their abuse and write about their abuse. The abuse generally leads to their death. Children become empowered with adulthood. Hopefully, they don't continue the cycle, and they write a book, or they attend, they give public service speeches, they talk about it, they get the word out so other children aren't affected. What is so shocking is that all of us, barring an accident of some sort, are going to be a member of this group. And the whole system is poorly lacking. With the legal system, we don't even have a legal definition. The elder justice field of law, there is no definition for a successful intervention. In other words, family thinks something's going on, they call Adult Protective Services, and an investigator comes out, there's a case, and the elderly individual is put in a nursing home. Is that a good intervention? That's the last thing the elderly person wanted.
Right.
So we can't even define what a good result is, and it's really, really a bad situation compared with, it's a bad situation across the board. Child abuse and spousal abuse, I'm not in any way belittling those. I'm saying elder abuse deserves the same amount of our attention and concern. We are all going to be a part of this group, and our elders right now deserve better than this. And as far as criminal laws go, yes, bigger cities, DA's offices are just starting to educate their assistant district attorneys on elder abuse. But really, it's one of the doctors said, if you gave a police officer the choice between going in, following an armed criminal into a dark alley, and going into a home where an elderly man has been beaten and is crying and his children are extremely upset, he would choose to go into the dark alley because he's trained for it. They're just not trained for it. They aren't trained to deal with these situations. And it's like that with nursing homes. They aren't trained well enough to what to look for in the patients. Doctors, a lot of the times, doctor seminars on YouTube are available. You can see doctors talk about it, educating other doctors. But the doctors, sadly, are more interested in prescribing another medication. And one of the elder abuse awareness advocates, who's a doctor at Cal Irvine, Dr. Mosqueda in California, she was saying that over her career she's actually taken more elderly off prescriptions than put on. She said they're just on an amazingly high number of prescriptions. I know that's a topic for another show, but so many of the elderly, they get to a point where their welfare is in our hands and we are failing them. As far as the penalties go, going through the criminal justice system is different than with child abuse and spousal abuse because the statutes are lacking on that topic. It'll just be straight fraud, or it'll be, aggravated assault. I mean, it won't be there. As far as elder abuse statutes, it's nothing like in the late 70s and early 80s when so many positive changes were made to what used to be known in Texas as the rape statute. Changed to the sexual assault statute. Quit blaming the victim. We're at the blaming the victim stage. As a matter of fact, with the stage of elder abuse research, there was a National Research Council, federally funded group, did a report, was hired a report out. In 2003, the National Research Council did a report on elder abuse. And that report stated that this is what it concluded. Little is known about its characteristics, causes, or consequences, or about effective means of prevention. Let's think about that. Elder abuse. Little is known about its characteristics, causes, or consequences, or about effective means of prevention. They just said we know nothing. We know nothing. That just covered the whole thing. You heard the definition earlier. We know nothing. It said that in 2003. 12 years later, we didn't catch up. A report stated that we're decades behind. We're decades behind. You can assume that means 3, because if it was only 2, they'd have said it. So we're essentially, and I referenced what used to be the rape statute, late 70s, early 80s. That changed. We're about there with elder abuse, and the fact that it's been allowed to go this long. And after 2003, the alarm was sounded by a National Research Council report, and to have a report 12 years later state that we're still way behind, it's not getting the attention it deserves.
And as a society, we're getting older. We've got all the baby boomers that are up in age. My birth date puts me in the latter part of baby boomers. And I'm 5 years away from hitting 60. So it's this is intriguing to me. Just the topic alone, the younger elder are more susceptible to elder abuse, and we still don't even have a viable definition. Now, this topic, Steve has an article that's going to be in our February newsletter on this issue. We are also going to expand that article and include it with a copy of this tape or CD, this audio program. We're going to include that with it, all for the $10 cost. And again, the program is titled Our Elderly, a National Treasure, Not a Cash Crop. So this report will be printed up, and it will be included with the price of the CD, okay? So we've come to the end of the first half. We've covered a lot of ground, but we have got so much more to cover. I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Power of Prophecy with Dr. Steve in the office today talking about elder abuse. We'll be right back after this brief message. Don't go anywhere. Hello, friends. Got a book that goes really well with our program today. It's written by Mike King, titled The Morphine Genocide, How the Med Mafia Kills Our Elderly with Palliative Care. Now, Mike wrote this book with a friend of his named Al Esposito. Now, that's not really his name. The names are changed, but the events in this book are factual. It is a true story. Now, you can disagree with the overall hypothesis and conclusions, but the data points and events witnessed are all presented factually with neither embellishment nor omission. Only the names, dates, and places have been changed. So, what should you care about the alleged murder of Maria Esposito? Doesn't everyone have to go at some point? Why should old people be tortured just to artificially extend life for a little while longer? After all, she did live to a very ripe old age of 91. Get over it. Putting aside your own personal philosophical view of palliative care and or euthanasia in general, here's the problem. Neither she nor her husband nor any of her children ever agreed to euthanizing a strong-hearted woman who was not terminal, not brain damaged, and not in pain. That would make this a case of murder by deception. Of greater interest to you, the reader, is the logical inference that follows such an allegation. You see, if this opinion is valid, then you or your own elderly parents may one day be targeted for deadly palliative care, sedation upon entering an American hospice or hospital. Wow. This book is 74 pages. We're only asking $9 for this book. The Morphine Genocide. It is a powerful book because it's not based on a true story. It is a true story. We're supposed to honor thy mother and father, but we're sentencing them to death before their time. And we need to be made aware of it. So this book, Morphine Genocide, is available for only $9. Please add $5 for shipping and handling. Make it a total of $14. That's it, $14. You're going to want a copy of this book. Now, it's a large format book. Mike King doesn't embellish. He cuts right to the point. He cuts right to the quick of the matter. And this book is very important for you to have, for you to read, for you to pass on to your friends, your family. It's only $9 a book. So if you can, get a couple, pass them out. Make people aware of this issue, okay? That's why we're doing this program today. Dr. Steve talked about the elderly down in down in Florida that were affected by Irma when there was a place where they could go to be protected right across the street. And the caregivers at this home didn't do that. They let these people die. We need to treat our elderly with respect. They have knowledge that we need to glean from them. Okay? The Morphine Genocide. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's only $9, add $5 for shipping and handling. You can phone your order in, toll-free, in Canada and the U.S. Our toll-free number is 1-800-234-9673. That's 1-800-234-9673. You can also go online to our webpage, powerofprophecy.com. Powerofprophecy.com. I've got an ad for the book on the front page. I've also got a search engine on the upper right-hand corner. You can just type in morphine, and Mike's book will pull up. You can order it through our online secure shopping cart. Whether you phone it in or you go online to order, you can use Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or American Express. And if you call it in, we'll be happy to talk to you. We've got great people here. We'll get your order processed, and it'll ship the next business day. Okay? We don't dally. We want this information in your hands post-haste. Now, you can also send a check, money order, or cash. Make the check or money order payable to Power of Prophecy. And our address is 1708 Patterson Road. That's Patterson Road, Austin, Texas, 78733. And as soon as we get your order in, we'll open it on the mail table, get it processed through the database, get it back to Dr. Steve, and he'll get this bad boy on its way to you pronto. That's our promise to you. Tex began this a long time ago. People didn't order it to wait 4 to 6 weeks. By that time, you may have forgotten what you ordered. We want you to get it now. So we'll get it to you as fast as we can. Now, we're all subject to the Postal Service, but it doesn't stay here more than the next business day, and they're usually gone. Okay? Now, let's return to our regular program. We're talking about elder abuse, and I mentioned earlier some of the things, and Steve has expanded on a lot of it, but there's a summary of findings here that covers a breakdown on this. And the first one, Steve, is exploitation, which is almost $17 billion a year. What is the defining feature of that one?
Exploitation, what's so upsetting about the exploitation aspect is that these businesses, individuals that are engaged in this, are actually doing, and I say this in quotes, legitimate business. These are hidden shipping and handling costs, work from home schemes, weight loss or dietary products that are a joke, excessive gifts, misleading financial advice. And these businesses are operating openly, and they claim that they've got the consent of the victim. Now, that first, the hidden shipping and handling or subscriptions, that's a lot of fine print stuff there. Sign something, and then your card's getting charged for this, that, or the other. This is stuff that can happen to anyone, but these businesses absolutely target the elderly. And like you mentioned earlier, it's a $17 billion a year problem, and there's just very little that's being done about that aspect.
What other findings have they got? I mean, I see criminal fraud.
Criminal fraud is going to be the con artists and identity theft. For example, the identity theft, a lot of the way they will do that is they'll send a letter or the victim will get a phone call. And again, this can happen to anyone, but they are targeting, they have mark lists or target lists. They pass these lists around of people that are answering the phone and engaging. We're going to talk about prevention, but just remember, engaging just once. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Do you have any kids? Oh, yes. He'll always be friendly. He's going to be a great guy. You may even look forward to his phone calls, but that will get it going. And that will put your phone number on a list, and it'll get passed around, and then the mailbox will fill up. The phone will be ringing constantly. That's the identity theft. It starts with car title or home equity loans. The reverse mortgage scams, opening up credit lines. The way they do that is they call and they say, this is enter local bank name here, and we need to verify your account information. There's been some fraud recently, and we just need to make sure that your information is correct, or it'll be in letter form. Being very helpful, the victim will respond. They take that information, they buy, the credit is generally good. I mean, our elderly are generally very responsible people. They've got good credit. They open up credit lines, bank accounts. They will buy cars, generally credit cards. They'll just max out the credit cards. And I mentioned reverse mortgage schemes. Under the con artists, which that alone is almost $10 billion a year. The average 5-year loss is $13,000. And that is what it sounds like. It's a guy who calls and wants you to give him money. And it is one of those things where when you talk about it, you say, well, who would do that? Nobody's going to, if somebody calls and says, I want your money, well, it doesn't really work like that. We take into consideration with the at-risk group, they're targeting elderly who sadly could be out of touch with their relatives and are happy to get a phone call. They're happy to talk to someone, especially someone who's giving them great news. They've won the Canadian lottery. It's great news. We're going to need just a few things from you. First of all, there's a handling fee involved, and I've actually got a story. This one of these scams touched Tex Mars. Tex Mars's family. His mother was a target, and Tex. I wish he could be here to tell the story because it's much better coming from him. But I'll do my best. It was a Nigerian scam based out of New Jersey. And, well, I say it was based out of New Jersey. That's where the Social Security check ended up being mailed to. But she had won a car. Very exciting. Now, Tex's mother was 96 and was not driving. But that really, the research shows that isn't the point. It comes down more to just the excitement of getting a daily call, talking to someone. But really, there's a lot we still don't understand about it. But she won the car. They just needed the title fees, the delivery fees. The fees went on and on and on. The mail lady actually became suspicious and told, at the time, one of Tex's sisters lived next door to the mother. So she went next door and said, I think your mother is being targeted by fraudsters and con artists. And at the time, Tex's family was unaware of this, but Tex's sister was having health problems of her own. And so she didn't pass that information along, and nothing was done. And it wasn't until one of Tex's other sisters was going to get her groceries and found out that she didn't have any money. And went to the bank, didn't have any money in her account. Mom, where's your Social Security check? I'm not sure. Well, she called the Social Security Administration and found out that one of the documents, one of those delivery documents, one of the fees that she had signed some paperwork to get that car was to have her Social Security check directly mailed to someone in New Jersey. So Tex's sister went to the police. The police chief said, boy, they're terrible. They're getting a lot of the people around here, and there's nothing we can do. That's interstate fraud, and that's not stuff we handle. I'll talk to your mom, and went over, talked to Tex's mom. She agreed with everything he said. He said, these people are stealing from you. They're thieves. And she said, oh, yes, that's a terrible thing they're doing. Agreed with every bit of it. Phone rang 20 minutes after he left. Hello, how are you doing today? Oh, well, hello, how are you? She was happy to talk to him. Eventually, they were able to get, it was a lot of work dealing with the Social Security Administration, but they were able to get the checks redirected back to their rightful recipient. But the whole thing was extremely upsetting. And with these con artists, and I mentioned, what to look for. Really staying in touch socially is so important, because then people are there. You can be there to see if your loved one is being taken advantage of. And if you've somehow gotten on a list and you're being targeted, just do not engage. And engaging will increase the phone calls. Another thing regarding the phone calls is just do not give any personal information over the phone. Use direct deposit for all your checks. Post and open your own mail. Just be very, very diligent about doing that. And if you feel like, if your eyesight or a loved one's eyesight's failing, be there to open it with them. Don't let these things, 6 weeks, you know what can happen in 6 weeks. Everything can get cleared out. So in addition to not giving personal information over the phone, using direct deposit for your checks, really just be aware that you probably didn't win. And if your loved one tells you they've won something, that's a big, big red flag. Big red flag. So that covers the criminal fraud aspect. Like Jerry mentioned, almost $13 billion. That's essentially anonymous illegal activity. You know, these guys, we don't know who they are, but they're calling and they end up getting the money.
Even those that have email, I constantly see scam emails come into my inbox, and all it takes is one person to respond to that email, mistakenly give them any of your information, and they'll have you. Now, there's a list of scams out there. One of them is the Buyers Club, where a senior is offered a low-priced cruise, but they have to enroll in a free trial of Buyers Club. Everybody thinks that it'll end automatically, but the fine print always says, no, it doesn't. My wife recently got scammed by somebody claiming to be from the HGTV show Fixer Upper. Joanna Gaines was offering cosmetics. My wife is, okay, I'm not going to give her age. She's younger than me, but she's not that much younger than me. But she fell for this, thinking that she was going to get a free sample. She put it on the credit card. The next thing you know, there's $300 taken out of our checking account because she didn't pay attention to the fine print. That happens with this Buyers Club. But there's other scams. The obituary scam.
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention funeral home and cemetery fraud, which same right along the same lines. Counterfeit prescription drugs, and you mentioned the internet aspect. Those emails about the account verification, those look legitimate. I recall getting one. Email was kind of a new thing. It was back in like 99. It was, if I recall, Bank of America. They wanted my account information, and it was from Bank of America. I mean, it said it right there. They had the logo and everything. Luckily, I got another email saying, do not do that. We never request your information. And that's another thing. If they're requesting things that make you a little nervous, they probably wouldn't do that if it's legitimate. They would. That's the kind of thing that you would do in person at the branch.
Yeah, like date of birth, social security
exactly.
number.
And so internet fraud is huge in this. With the elderly who are online, I know I was concentrating on the telephone and mail aspect, but for everyone. I mean, internet fraud is a massive, massive problem. And, you said something earlier. It made me think. Remember We Are Charlie Hebdo or whatever after the whole incident in France there,
right.
which we won't get into, but, really, we are all elderly. I mean, we're going to be elderly. We need to treat this like we're all a part of this group because we are going to be part of this group. And if we treated it like that, maybe we could start getting the word out. This affects us directly, because now or in a matter of years, we're in this group. We are all seniors. And it just really, looking into this has been so eye-opening from the perspective of how dramatically far behind we are in dealing with this problem. And the conspiracy side of me was saying, could this be because these, they're getting into nest eggs that would otherwise be invested and they're putting it back in the economy, and so they don't want, why in the world are we letting these people steal life savings? I mean, and I don't think that's it, by the way, but I was running through what could this be? And I think part of it may be facing our own mortality. Maybe it's upsetting. I'm at a loss for why we don't have a definition of what a good intervention is, what a successful outcome, that's the legal term, successful outcome, for an intervention, why people don't know that $36 billion is being stolen, $17 billion of which was done legally. I say that in quotes, legally, by businesses operating legally. I mean, this is, like the fine print. I already talked about it. But, Jerry, at the last section of that is the $7 billion. You said almost $7 billion. It's just under $7 billion. The average 5-year loss is $26,000, and that is caregiver abuse. That shocked me. It's the smallest amount. Now, when I say just under $7 billion, before this report came out, we actually thought the entire amount for a year was $5 billion. So before this report came out, to show you how pathetic the research is and the attention giving to this epidemic is, we actually were off by $31 billion. So actually the caregiver abuse at just under $7 billion is $2 billion more than we thought the entire problem was. So by no means is this small. It's only small relative to the other criminal activity by legal business entities, the con artists, and the guys online with the identity theft. The caregiver abuse, though, is that's the one that really is painful. I mentioned the Pearl Harbor veteran who came to really care for his carer. He really looked forward to her visits. She's extremely nice to him, and she'd spent his entire life savings, or a good part of it, on his credit cards. He quit eating, and it led directly to his passing away. And theft by family members is a problem. It's an abuse of a trusting relationship. That's what we see with caregiver abuse. And over half of the caregiver abuse is by family or close friends. In other words, I went into it, I was upset, this nursing home thing, this is an outrage. The caregiver abuse, those are the people you hire to come to your house and then they steal everything from you. Well, actually, no, it's over half of it is family members who may have a drug habit. They may be rationalizing it. I'm going to inherit it anyway. Plus, I go over all her documents. She'll never know about it, and I'm just getting my money early. And as for my brothers and sisters, if they cared about mom like I do, they'd be here. I'm owed this. So the fact that their inheritance is impacted, frankly, I don't care. But that is abuse, and it's theft, and it's wrong. And it almost always... It is discovered. It's often discovered after the victim passes away. But there's an example of an elderly woman in San Diego whose daughter passed away, and her granddaughter came and lived with her. And her granddaughter was 18, developed a drug habit. Her grandmother, the victim's eyesight was failing, so the granddaughter would go through the mail and read it to her. Turned out the granddaughter had a $300 a day drug habit, and the account that had her $60,000 savings in it, she got a phone call from the bank one day saying that the account was overdrawn. She was under the impression it still had $60,000 in it. Over the prior 5 months, she'd been cleaned out. That was by her granddaughter. Rewritten wills, powers of attorney, that's family. That's the family, and sibling relationships can get a little sticky sometimes with regard to mom and dad. I mentioned earlier, sometimes the victims blame themselves. We're getting kind of into the same thing with family relationships. Everybody, it's family. It's family. But, we mentioned dementia. Over 50% of the victims have dementia. That's going into the wallet, getting $50. He looks down. I thought I had $50 in here. No, you didn't. You forgot. Or, I need $200 to get your groceries. Oh, okay. And you get him $10 worth of groceries. That a neighbor, of a lady who was defrauded in Los Angeles, she had a neighbor who offered to take her ATM card and get her prescriptions and groceries. She was so thankful. The family was so thankful. Found out 9 months later, he'd withdrawn $12,000 for himself as well. And what is so upsetting and painful is that this caregiver abuse aspect is the trusting relationship. And I mentioned how often elder abuse results in death. It can often be because of physical abuse, but so often it breaks the victim's heart. And really the will to go on, it just seems to go away. And especially when a son or a daughter is involved in rendering the victim broke. And then the victim ends up living in another son's or daughter's basement, living on an allowance. And this, according to a seminar given by an assistant district attorney in San Diego, this is a major problem in his area. And when you look at the stats, $7 billion a year. This is an epidemic. I mean, the physical aspects of it are the most shocking and upsetting. And then you get into the breaking of trust and the theft. That is absolutely upsetting and shocking as well. And that also makes up a huge part of this epidemic.
Now, if you suspect elder abuse, I think a lot of the laws are written at the state level, but is there any way you can implement or instigate an investigation if you think that there's elder abuse?
Yeah, and you mentioned the state level. That is right. Actually, the Social Security Act, Title 20 of that Social Security Act was signed into law in 1975. Actually mandates states to develop and maintain protective services agencies for these vulnerable adults. Then we get into the legalese with the definitions of seniors in various states, but it is on the state level, like you said. So I can't give a number as far as on the state level goes with adult protective services, but I do know from my research that there are some really good, it's known as APS, Adult Protective Services, really good APS investigators out there who care and do a good job. A neighbor can suspect something and make a call, and they will investigate. Now, the federal level is not involved nearly as much. They've gotten involved a little bit more with regard to federally funded nursing homes, but there, as one report stated, there are huge gaps in protecting our elderly from abuse. And one of the gaps is you get protection if it's not federally funded. Oh, well, it's private. Okay, well you don't have access to an ombudsman. An ombudsman, a representative, someone who is not on the side of the nursing home. This is someone who can represent you and is vital if you're being abused or a loved one is being abused. But if it's not a federally funded nursing home, that's out. There are just big gaps in our protection of our seniors. Some states do better jobs than others, but the first step in reporting elder abuse is contacting the Adult Protective Services office, your local Adult Protective Services office. 911 is a call that obviously would put the person through with Adult Protective Services, but you can also get more help and more information from the Elder Care Locator, and that is 1-800-677-1116.
Thank you, Dr. Steve, for coming in and talking about elder abuse. I appreciate you being in here with me. Thank you for tuning into Power of Prophecy. My name's Jerry Barrett. I'm your host, and I hope you'll tune in next week at this same time. Tune in and discover the power of prophecy.